My name is Tony Chinni, and I am interviewing Mr. Lorenzo Tolliver. We are at 199 North Main Street. Today's date is Monday, October 31st, 2011, and the time is 1:05 p.m. Welcome, Mr. Tolliver. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you coming down.
Thank you.
First of all, were you born in Mansfield?
Yes,
Okay.
born in Mansfield back in 1932
Okay.
on Lewis Avenue.
Lewis Avenue. What was it? Why did your family settle in Mansfield?
Well, I guess back at that time it was, the work was about as hard to come by as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved from the south north. And they settled in Mansfield because my dad got a job at the steel mill.
Okay. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
Well, it started out 16 of us, and I'm the last one.
Okay. So what was life like in your family growing up?
Well, it was strictly family life because you didn't have the activities back at that time as you have now.
Mm.
And we was a very close-knit family.
Yeah.
And my dad was a person that believed in family first. And that's the way we lived, that's the way we was brought up.
Okay. So you mentioned that your father worked at the steel mill. That's what brought the family
Yes.
to town. What about your mother? What did she do?
She was strictly housewife.
Housewife. Okay. Your dad, that is, did he work at the steel mill for a long period of time, or did he?
That's the only job he had here.
Really?
From the time he came till the time he really didn't retire by age. My dad went blind back in 1949,
Oh, wow.
and so he had to retire because of physical.
Okay. Now, did that his blindness, was it due at all to the conditions of his work, or was it just something that occurred?
No, it was cataract.
Okay.
It was.
I asked that because there were some folks that we've talked to in these interviews that had said that I want to say it was either Humphreys or Peabody Barnes, that the dust in there was so bad that a lot of guys went blind.
It could have been both, but they was probably talking Humphreys.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but I know that we've heard that before. So where did you go to school growing up?
At what's Crevely now was Bowman Street School at that time.
Okay. Now, were you there during the era of the segregation that was at Bowman Street? Or?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, at the time, that's the time that we didn't know anything about discrimination, color, or anything like that. Because out there, everybody lived together.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, our neighbors was the Kellenoffs, which owned half of the downtown area that they used to call, I guess what they called it now. But he owned from Main Street back to the alley by the Davies apartment.
Oh, wow.
And they was our neighbors.
Hmm.
And when I learned about discrimination or whatever you want to call it, was when the day I entered school, started school. And we all walked to school together, and when we got to the school, we were split up. You go here, you go here.
Okay.
And I was in the time when it was 3 black teachers at Bowman Street School. And each one of them taught 2 grades. First and second was in one room, third and fourth was in a room, fifth and sixth was in a room. And so you was in one room for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
You just moved from one side of the room to the other.
Okay.
And yeah, it was very, very, very discriminatory at that time. So.
Yeah, we've heard things about they didn't take recess at the same time.
Oh no.
Things like that.
No, they kept us totally separated. And It even was a time when we had to walk back home for lunch. We wasn't allowed to stay at school for lunch. And the white kids, if I may put it that way, that rode the school bus to school, they stayed at school for lunch. And the teachers had to work it among themselves somehow or another, schedule it among themselves, that they had to trade off rooms because we didn't have a cafeteria. And the kids ate in the rooms. And when it was their time to eat in the room that we was in, we was required to get back to school and clean up the room before we started class.
That's a
And,
wow.
and just one time we just met among ourselves and says, we're tired of this. We're not going to do this anymore. And we were, I guess you could say that was the first strike that the Mansfield school system had. And from that, it involved that we didn't have to do that anymore.
Really?
Because we stood up and refused to do it, and so they had to stop it.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that one yet. That's wow. So how did you guys face any sort of repercussions for that, or I mean, was it just?
Oh, they threatened us and that's going to expel us and so forth and so on. And then that's when it involved the parents. And then when it involved the parents, that there was one man in the neighborhood. Well, he actually stayed on Lily Street. His name was Mr. Middlebrook. And then he took it up, and when he took it up, it became a citywide issue, a statewide issue even. And that's when it came to a stop.
Okay. Now, when you say it came to a stop, are we referring to the segregation or just the lunch issue?
Just that lunch issue.
Okay. So it was further down the road that the segregation ended.
Right.
Okay.
I would say that was a kickoff from it, because from then, when they all got involved, that's when, in a matter of time, in there, that's when all the black teachers was dismissed. And all that came in time, not suddenly, but
Right.
all that came in time.
Okay. So now, did you personally go through the full, up to sixth grade
All
through
the
that
way-
system?
All the
Yeah.
way through it, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to come back to some of these issues. What did you then go on to John Simpson and?
Yeah. Well, the teachers wasn't dismissed until years after we were gone.
Okay.
But what I'm saying about the lunch area,
Uh-huh.
that started it,
Okay.
and from there it just snowballed until it came to what it is now.
Okay.
When we went to Simpson, we was so far advanced, because we was in one room for 2 years and you heard everything being taught. But that actually I missed a year of school when I went to Simpson, because I had to learn to study again and everything, because what they was teaching us in the 7th grade, I had really heard it in the 5th grade.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then Simpson, it was a lot of it in Simpson, but it wasn't as prominent as it was when we was in the elementary, because then things had started to change. Now, to be truthful, I don't know if it was like that in the rest of the elementary schools in Mansfield, but I just knew about Bowman Street.
Right. Okay. Okay. So from there, did you then go on to to senior high?
From Simpson to senior high, yes.
Okay. What year did you graduate?
51.
1951. Okay. You kind of mentioned the three black teachers. Were there any teachers, in particular that really stood out to you that you remember especially well?
Especially well was my 5th and 6th grade teacher, which was Ruth Carter.
Okay.
And she was so far ahead of her time that you look back now And you said, why didn't I listen to everything she said, you know?
Yeah.
She was just that far ahead of her time.
Okay. In what sense? Just.
She gave us to know, even back then, she said, because back then, if a white person would walk up and call you black, it was a fight.
Hmm.
And she taught us even then that one day you're going to be proud to be called a black man.
Hmm.
She said, you're going to be ready to fight at colored than you are black.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a person that taught us the whole thing, like the Gettysburg Address. I learned that in the 5th grade.
Okay.
I could almost recite it now. The Emancipation Proclamation. She taught us how to study and to remember that.
Wow.
The Constitution and what the amendments meant
Mm-hmm.
and how we got involved into the Constitution through the amendments. And it was things like that's why I say she was so far ahead of her time, it was pathetic.
That's pretty advanced for 5th grade.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. What about activities in school? Anything stand out?
Well, as far as elementary, it was just tag football. It really wasn't pursued or pushed.
Mm-hmm.
The junior high, we had the full gamut of basketball, football, track, and so forth. And I was involved in track and football.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, senior high, they had everything,
Mm-hmm.
which I only played football at senior high.
Okay. Did you go on to college at all, or
No.
no?
Being that my dad was blind, only my mom was working. I had to take a job
Mm-hmm.
because I still had 3 siblings under me,
Mm-hmm.
and mom was the only income.
Okay.
So
What was she doing at that time?
at that time, she was working she was a cleaning lady at the hospital, at
Okay.
the general hospital. And later on, she went to cleaning at the school. She was working for the schools themselves.
Okay. Now you said I always mix this up. Is it Lewis Avenue, right, or is it Lewis Street?
Lewis Avenue.
Lewis Avenue. Okay. Was that where you guys stayed pretty much your whole childhood, or did you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So my next question is, what was the neighborhood like back then?
The whole neighborhood was really family oriented. I mean, wherever you was at in the neighborhood, you was almost home, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody then, this saying they have now, it takes a village to raise a child.
Mm-hmm.
Well, believe me, that's not a modern saying. We knew that way back then. And everybody in that neighborhood, you would consider a parent, because everybody in that neighborhood could discipline you.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing you would do is beg them not to tell mom and dad, because then you got it twice.
Right. Yeah, we've heard that over and over again. That's
Yes.
yeah. What about one of the things we're interested in is sort of memories of the stores and restaurants that maybe were in the area, or anything you remember about that?
Okay. At one time, Kroger was up on the corner of Bowman and Harker. Had a big drugstore on the bottom, apartments on the top, and a Kroger store. A&P was down south of the track on Bowman, where the Jones Potato Chip Company is. That was a big A&P market. As far as further out on Bowman Street, you had little storefront markets. About the biggest one was called Lumpkins Market. It was black owned. And it was like your real small markets are today, even, you know. But that was smaller than the one that's up on Spring Mill and Harker, much smaller.
The Richies, you mean?
Much smaller than Richie's.
Yeah. Now, was the Kroger a similar thing? Was it pretty small at that time? Or
It was small.
Yeah.
And even the A&P that was further down on Bowman Street where Jones Potato Chip is now. That was one of the larger ones. Well, that was one of the larger ones that was even in town.
Yeah.
At that time.
Now, would you compare? Is it comparable to say like a Richie's? Is that the size we're talking about, or
Yes.
something about like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, some of the folks have told us about that area out Bowman Street being called Tombstone Territory.
Yes.
Does that mean anything to you?
Yes, because at that time, that was not city limits, see. And the city police were not allowed out there. That was because it wasn't city. It was just your county sheriff that come out there. And the people, I might be a little going out on a limb to say this, they almost governed themselves, policed themselves. And a lot of things went on. But as it went on, it was also handled.
Okay.
And it got its name as Tombstone Territory because if you didn't live out there, you really wasn't allowed out there. And if you came out, you came out on your own. You know? And even at that time when Palmer was sheriff, Doggy Long was a deputy and all that, the people knew them personally and they respected them. And the sheriff department also respected the people because they knew if something went on, if they was needed, the people would call them. If they didn't call them, they didn't need them. So.
Well, one of the ladies, I don't know if you know Mrs. Remmer.
Yes.
Her and her daughter, Ann Lindsay, did an interview just like this, and they were telling me about there was a series of bars out there.
It was 3 bars. Well, actually, in one block there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was five bars in the matter of just one block. It was 3 bars right in a row. Now, and the odd thing about it, at one time, it was one black bar right in the middle of 2 white bars. But they never came together. There was fights, but none that would bring you to memory, you know, not like that. And that's how people got along out there. You know, I knew that was a white bar, and I didn't go in it.
Okay. And that was pretty much across the board. It was self-segregation, so whites didn't go in the black bar, and vice versa.
But every once in a while, you're going to find somebody that'll cross over. But if they did, they wasn't hung for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was kind of a self-segregating kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the sort of the ethnic makeup of the neighborhood itself? Now, you mentioned your one neighbor. Now, I was making the assumption that was a white family you were referring to. So it was pretty mixed up out there when you were growing up, or?
It was totally mixed.
Okay.
It was totally mixed. It was more mixed then than it is now. Well, you don't have as many families now.
Right.
But at that time, I could go up and down the streets even now and name the different families that stay, you know, in places. Now it's empty lots, empty houses,
Mhm.
or houses been torn down and unkept lots and things like that. But at that time, back then, there was no such thing as that.
Yeah. I've heard there's been, quite a change in terms of the
Oh.
amount of folks that lived out there and
If you take an older person now that lived there, that would come from out of town, you take them through there now, they wouldn't recognize them.
yeah. Okay. What about, we've heard things like in the 40s and 50s, most blacks lived north of Longview, that there
Right.
wasn't a lot, there were a few
Right.
families, but is that your impression of
Oh,
things?
yeah. In fact, I'm one of the first ones that moved south of Longview,
Okay. And where did you move to? And,
where I'm living right now.
uh-huh.
Uh, There was a few families. I'm trying to count. Might have been two. But I can only really remember for sure one. That was south of Longview.
Mhm.
And I can't remember any that was south of 6th Street.
Mm.
Not really.
Okay. Now, so when you moved into the neighborhood, was there any issues? Any?
No. When I moved into the neighborhood back in '67,
Mhm.
all the people that was around me, I was welcomed in, really.
Mhm.
We didn't lock our doors,
Mm.
didn't have to do that. And if you locked your doors, everybody had a skeleton key that worked the locks.
Yeah.
When you'd go on vacation, you tell them I'm going on vacation, they would feed your dog, they would take care of your house, they'd shovel the snow in the winter, and we all got along that way. But it gradually, it went to like an all-black neighborhood.
Mhm. Now, when did you think that started to happen? When did you kind of become aware of that?
It was gradual,
Mhm.
very gradual, because even around me, excuse me, I bought I bought 4 properties around me,
Mm.
and as houses went up for sale, people was buying the houses, but it was absentee landlords.
Mm.
Groups buying up groups of houses.
Mhm. Now, are we talking like in the 70s and 80s, or when? I mean, what era are we talking here?
Now, I bought my property in '67. Now, the '70s, starting the '70s and '80s, now that's when it got real heavy about the absentee landlords,
Okay.
they buying up properties
And would you say that's continued to this very day?
to this very day.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's our impression here,
Yeah.
the work we're doing.
right.
Okay. So sort of along the same vein, one of our questions is, what was life like for African Americans in Mansfield in the 40s and 50s?
The '40s and '50s, it was, I'm gonna say, I would just use the word hard, because it was only certain jobs you could get, it was only certain places you could work. It wasn't an open industry to you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, '30s, '40s, the foundries was open to us. Barnes, the Brass, Humphreys, I shouldn't say that, I won't. The lower jobs in the steel mill. Those are the kind of jobs that was open to you. It started changing when General Motors opened up in '57.
Okay.
That's when it started changing.
And in what sense? How did it change? Is more opportunity or?
Opportunity as far as getting what you would call a good job.
Okay.
Now, now you take like, when I got out of school, that summer I had worked at the steel mill. But now, Shelby Depot opened up, which was Air Force Depot at that time. And so I was fortunate enough to get a job over there instead of going back to steel mill. And it was a large contingent of black people that left Mansfield to work at the Shelby Depot. But it was a matter of transportation, of traveling, because at that time, no blacks could stay in Shelby.
Right, okay.
But it was a large contingent every day that went from Mansfield to Shelby.
Okay, now was this the era when there was the sort of, what do I want to call it, like a streetcar that went out there, or was that earlier?
That was earlier.
That was earlier, okay. So folks would just have to drive out there, or
Right.
take a, was there a bus or anything like that, or did they?
Not that I can remember. It was mostly just car travel.
Okay. Okay. That brings up a question. I've heard about the Shelby Depot. What did you do there? What was it like working there? What was that all about?
I was a warehouseman,
Okay.
but it was very prejudiced, very prejudiced. I only know one black at that time that advanced as far as a GS 11 or I think at as high as he went, it was GS 11. None of the top jobs.
And now that, when you say GS11, is that like security clearance, or is that like just a ranking of?
Rank.
Okay.
Let's put it, I think about as high as it went over there was a GS 13.
Okay.
That's a grade level. How they grade them, how the government grades them.
Okay.
Grades job.
And it's pay and benefits and all that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
yes.
So is 13 better than a 1, or is it vice versa?
No, 13 was the highest.
The highest, okay.
Yeah.
And you started at GS1 if you walk in the door, or?
I think over there they started at a GS 4, a GS 3, or something like that.
Okay.
But that was the graded grade levels. But now I was in the could you call it labor class?
Sure.
Because they called it WB, which was warehouse floor.
Okay.
And in that level, you could go to a WB 7.
Okay.
Well, I did make the WB 7 4 step, which was as high as I could go in that field.
I see. And you say that, I mean, in terms of your race, or in terms of the type of work that you did?
It's the type of work that you did, and you had to be excellent to get there.
Okay.
You know, you could get to the 3rd step, but it's very hard to acquire the 4th step.
I see. Okay. And continuing on a similar vein, what was it like at the steel mill when you worked there? What did you do there?
I was a laborer on the brick gang.
Okay.
And nothing skill. All the skill was the bricklayers and so forth, which you didn't touch their tools. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. Until a hole would burn through a furnace or something like that, and they would welcome you to lay in a brick or two and get out of the heat, you know. But,
Wow.
no, it was just jobs that you didn't get, that's all.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask you, was that your first job at the steel mill, or what was your first job?
That was it.
That was it?
No, that was my first job at the steel mill.
Okay, so what was your first job?
A pin boy at a bowling alley.
Okay. Which bowling alley?
I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it was a bowling alley out on 42 at that time. And then I went from there, uptown used to be the Colony.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked at the Colony.
Okay. Now, was that did the Colony used to be out on 42, or are there two different things?
There was 2 different bowling alleys. I can't think of the name of the one that was out there. But then, that's where I got my first experience at. Then I got a job up here at the Colony. The Colony used to be up here on 3rd Street, across from the library.
All right. And then from there, what was your next job?
Let's see, where did I go from there? That's when I went to the steel mill.
Okay. And then you said that was a summer job?
Yeah, that was a summer job.
Okay. And then out to the Shelby Depot?
Right.
And then from there?
And then from the Shelby Depot, I went to Loudonville to Flexi.
Now, I'm not familiar with that at all. What's that?
They used to build buses there at Flexi.
I see. Where did you work there for a while? Or?
I worked there for, I think, 3 years. Then I went back to Shelby, but I worked for GSA.
Now, what's GSA?
Government Service Administration. They store and sales back to the government offices and depots and so forth and so on.
Okay.
And I stayed there till 70, 71. I think I stayed there 6 more years, to 71. Then I got a job in trucking, at Duff Trucking.
Okay. What was that? Trucking?
Duff.
Duff. Okay.
Okay. They're bankrupt now. They're out now. But then I stayed there until 86. And then 86, after they went bankrupt, I went to CCA, Conway Central Trucking.
Okay.
And I stayed there until 93 is when they retired me physically. For physical reasons, I had to retire.
Okay.
Then I've been retired since then.
Okay. How did the civil rights movement affect Mansfield, or affect you personally? Any memories of that going on here, or?
Well, now that really started affecting us back in the 50s, early 50s, because then I'm thinking it just made them really aware, made people aware really what was going on. And as the years went by, especially in the 60s, I think that's when it was really effective. When people find out that they really had to start to obeying the laws. Because until then, like at the Shelby Depot, they ain't paying attention to anything like that. If you didn't live in Shelby, because all your supervisors, everything, they were Shelbyans. And everybody knew everybody. They didn't recognize you.
Yeah. What about, we've heard things, a whole variety of things from, not being able to get loans, redlining, to everything from places like the Cameo or Coney Island not allowing you to eat in the restaurant and things. Any memories?
Oh, yes.
Like that?
Yeah. Now, it's interesting you would mention that, because one personal incident that happened with me, I was a treasurer at our church, and the people started complaining to me that the bank didn't want to cash their checks. Well, I wasn't aware of that because I didn't have that problem. And so I told him, I said, well, let me see what I can do. So I goes down to the bank. I won't call his name because I don't know how far that would go.
No problem.
And I told him, I said, what's going on? He said, well, it's bank policy anymore that if you don't have an account at the bank, that we don't have to cash your checks. And I says, well, how can you make that work? He said, well, they just won't cash your check. I said, but our church is a corporation. Yeah. I says, and I have members of this corporation saying that you won't cash their checks. And he says, oh, don't tell me you're gonna pull that on me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, pull what on you? I said, they're members of the corporation and our money is in this bank. And he says, let me take that up into the meeting, Lorenzo, and I'll get back with you. So he came back and he says, well, we'll cash their checks. I said, now look, I'm not interested in their personal checks. I won't take responsibility for that.
Mm-hmm.
But their paychecks and their retirement checks, I expect them to be cash.
Mm-hmm.
So they stopped it right now.
Mm-hmm.
One of the members came to me and said, they want to approve my loan and my credit's good.
Mm-hmm.
I said, it's got to be. I went back. I said, what is this all about? The only reason it worked for me because I had the power of the money in my hand.
Yeah.
And I asked him about that. I said, do this bank redline? And when I said that, everybody in that room jumped straight up. Oh, what's redlining? What's this? And, you know,
Yeah. Right.
surprise to me.
Sure.
But I stopped.
So when are we talking about? When was this? Was this?
We're talking in the 70s.
Okay. So as late as the 70s.
Yeah,
still,
we're talking even up in the 70s.
Hmm. Any other examples of things like that that you're willing to share? Or?
Those two are the most distinct in my mind right now that I can recall. But all that happened because of positioning.
Yeah.
You know, the position I was in.
Yeah.
And the people that was open to me to talk to, they said, well, they can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't go to school, things like that, you know. I said, what do you mean they can't do that?
Mm-hmm.
Then it was explained to me. When it was explained to me, then I knew how to go talk to them.
Okay. So what about folks like you've already mentioned, Mr. Middlebrook and O.C. Hill and some of the other, was there Reverend Washington, if I remember correctly?
Yes.
Any memories of their activities, things they did for the community that?
Now, Reverend Middlebrook, he was in real estate and insurance. And he was really up on civil rights, things like that. O.C. Hill, he was a politician's politician. You know.
Okay.
I don't know how long he was in city council.
A long time.
A long, long
Yeah.
time. Reverend Washington, he was a civil rights advocate, and he was well spoken. Just knowing words can get you a long way.
Yeah, they're powerful things.
Yeah. But I think one of the most forceful that was here was Joel King.
Okay. Anything you can share about Mr. King?
Now, I think a lot of times they would pass things or straighten things out just for him to be quiet, you know, because the man was an organizer.
Any specific incidents come to mind, or?
He didn't mind going to court with you.
Yeah.
See, he was not fearful of going to court with you. And he was so outspoken that I guess they would figure he'd draw too much attention.
So the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to
that's
speak.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. And he was a friend. I would say you didn't have to be his member to be his friend. If he thought you were right, he was with you. And if you, we always felt, even at that time, if you could get Joel King on your side, you had a winner.
It's quite a reputation.
Yeah. Now, those was the most outspoken that I can think of.
Mhm.
Now, about the most, the quietest one, I think that could get the most done was, at that time was my pastor, which is now Bishop Jordan.
Okay.
People knew him so well that just his word, you know. If he could speak well of you, and he would not speak well of you if it wasn't something well to be spoken of.
Yeah.
But if he could speak well of you, they would listen.
Okay. Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. To tell us about your church.
Well, now my church, you're getting next to my heart now. I joined this church in '73, in the fall of '73. I've been there ever since. And being there, I became a trustee in '74. And while being a trustee, I was appointed treasurer in '74.
Mhm.
And I was the treasurer up until 2005, I think, 2004.
Hmm.
And in that time, pastor decided to build a new sanctuary. And we started planning the sanctuary in about 1984, 85. We started building in 89, 88 or 89. And we moved into it in 91.
Hmm.
And what I like to tell about it, we built it interest-free.
Hmm.
It was scheduled to come in at $1.5 million,
Mhm.
and we bought it in under $1 million,
It's quite a feat.
and never financed nothing on
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, just for clarity on the record, we're talking Oasis of Love,
it.
right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And
Right.
now, what's the story with the name? Is it used to be Greater St. John's, or it is still, or?
No. It is the Oasis of Love of Greater St. John Church.
Okay.
God in Christ.
Okay.
It used to just be, the name was just Greater St. John,
Uh-huh.
CO, the Church of God in Christ.
Mhm.
That was under Bishop. When his son took over, because the bishop said, when we build a new sanctuary, first of all, we had land, or had rights to land, out on Lex Spring Mill,
Hmm.
where they built the Kmart.
Hmm. Okay.
We had the rights to that land. And so we went uptown, the banks approved everything. We came back to the church, and pastor said, God said no. What do you mean he said no? We got this thing all set. He said, God said interest-free. And the board says, oh, where'd you get this from? So he sat down, we talked about it. Everybody came into agreement. And then he said, we're not going to build out on Lex Spring Mill. He said, we're going to build right here. He said, we're going to use our money to upgrade our own area.
That's great.
We said, wait a minute. But everything he said worked.
Yeah. It's funny how that works out.
Yeah, everything he said worked. And I'm not talking about just worked halfway or this way or that way.
Yeah.
Even the banks and things uptown did not really know that that building was out there because there was no money from uptown out here.
Yeah. Okay, so what is the role of the church in your community?
It's a refuge for people. It's a help to the community. For instance, even this year alone, we have fed, oh God, I don't know how many people, but we have had 2 open feeding festivals on the corner of Bowman and Harker. That's our little park there.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring everything up there, and everything is cooked, everything is there. Come one, come all.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 2 of them this year.
That's great.
Every 3rd Friday, we feed the hungry. They come into the church, eat whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's just 2 of our outreaches. And it's a place, God knows how many ministries we have, drug ministries and this and that, homeless shelter, this and that. It's a refuge for the needy, really.
Okay. So tell us about your fondest memory growing up on the North End. Anything come to mind?
I would have to go back into my younger days. Is when I played slow ball, slow pitch,
Mm-hmm.
and we would have what we call round robin tournaments. And I can remember my wife and other wives fixing baskets and stuff. And we would be out there all night, people eating out each other's baskets, this, that. And it wasn't what you would call a community project. It was almost because teams came from out of town everywhere. And we played most of them down in Lexington.
Okay.
And at that time, Lexington was pretty shut off too, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But people would come. It looked like that time of year, people would come out from everywhere and just associate, you know.
Yeah.
Just.
Now, is this during like the 60s, or are we talking later? Or?
No, I'm talking later. I'm talking in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And people were just, it was just a fun time of the year.
Okay. Now, who organized it, or how did that, I mean, it was just friends calling friends and...
Friends calling friends, and at that time, Herman Stillwell was real popular, but he was really into ball, really into sports. And A.C. Jenkins, and there was others I can't recall right now.
Mm-hmm.
That it just organized it and started it, and it just ballooned.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And summertime, and I can remember people just would come, what do you got to eat? This and that. Everybody just in everybody else's baskets. All family oriented, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There was no drinking and
Mm-hmm.
doping and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nothing like that.
That
And
sounds nice.
it was just a joyful time that you can even reflect on.
Okay.
You know.
Okay, so, looking the other way, any not so good memories growing up? Anything stand out that...
if you take it all and you think about all of it, you think about, you have to be careful not to allow yourself not to think about how you was treated
Yeah.
and so forth and so on. And because if you do, that takes away from everything.
Yeah.
You just consider it as a part of life and you just go on.
Okay.
But there were some very unpleasant times, like it was pleasant.
Mhm.
But I'd much rather think on the pleasant.
What about a lot of the people we've interviewed have told us about memories of the friendly house and the roller rink and things like that?
Oh,
And
yeah.
anything you can add to that? Or?
Yeah, well, I wasn't a very astute customer of the roller rink,
Mhm.
even though I did go, but I wasn't too much involved in that.
Mhm.
But the friendly house, even when the friendly house was down on Main Street, down there next to the Davy Apartments,
Mhm.
before it moved over to Mulberry, where it's at now. Now, that was a segregated event,
Okay.
very segregated.
Is that the Wednesday night dances we're talking
Yeah.
about, or just in general? Or?
In general.
Okay.
In general.
Tell us about that.
We didn't have the same nights.
Mhm.
You know, the whites had their nights, the blacks had their nights. We probably all did the same thing,
Mhm.
but you didn't do anything together.
Hmm.
You know, like we didn't play basketball together.
Hmm.
They had their nights to play, we had our nights to play. Now, and it was guys that we went to school with, that you played at school with, but you didn't play at the friendly house with.
Hmm.
And just things like that.
Yeah.
And even the people that ran the friendly house, the top people wasn't bad in themselves, but it was the subordinates that they had under them
Mhm.
and the rules they set up.
Okay.
So,
So you think they were the ones that really kind of,
sure.
you know,
sure.
separated things out? Like what we've heard, one of the ladies talked about not being allowed to go to Hidden Hollow Camp.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that ring a bell at all, or?
Well, like I say, I wasn't involved in their camping and things like
Mhm.
that, because I never was a scout.
Okay.
But even in their summer camps.
Well, that's I think what she was referring to. Is
Right.
like, you know,
Their
black
summer
kids
camps.
couldn't even go;
No,
they weren't allowed.
no.
So
No,
okay.
no. That's why I don't know anything about that, because I was never involved, because you was never
Yeah.
allowed to go anyway.
Okay.
So,
All right. Wow. That's it's deep.
well, you see, most people know about the Mansfield that is,
Mhm.
but they know about the Mansfield that was.
Well, that's, you know, one of the things we're trying to get to some of that, to get it on the record so that, you know, it's not in history books, you know. It's in the memories of people that lived it.
Right,
So
right.
so you were alluding to the Mansfield that was, that as opposed to the Mansfield that is. Anything else you can?
We was talking about places where you could sit and eat. At that time, they had the 5 and dime stores uptown.
Okay.
At Cressley's and Eisler's and the Evergreens cafeteria. You could go and buy a sandwich and take out,
Mhm.
but you couldn't go and sit at the counter and eat. Isley's Dairy, that was there, they had that ice cream bar where you could go and order milkshake, but you couldn't sit down
Hmm.
and eat. Where else? Well, actually, it was no place uptown that a black man could go sit and eat,
Hmm. Not a single restaurant,
not a single restaurant.
really. Now, when did that start to change? Do you have any recollection of that, or?
Uh, That had to start to change back, I forget when, when we got our first black attorney, which was Corley.
Hmm.
I can't think of the year now. But it had to be in the 60s
Okay.
when it started to change.
Okay. And obviously, I'm sure that was a gradual thing that,
And
you know,
it was
different.
very gradual.
Yeah.
Very gradual.
Okay.
As it come back to memory, it looked like everything started about the same time. When the banks had to do it different, it looked like everything started to do it different.
Interesting.
You know, it would make one think that they had one big mass meeting and say, wait a minute, boys, we got to do this different.
Well, it's funny how you get the money involved and,
Yes.
and things start to
Yes.
to really change.
Yes.
Yeah.
When black folk really started to learn their rights,
Hmm.
that's when it started to change.
Okay. And was there, I mean, coming back to like talking about Middlebrook and Reverend Washington and O.C. Hill and folks like that. Now I understand that they were involved in getting better jobs at like the Westinghouse and things
Yes.
like that.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of the activities that went on?
I can't remember exactly their involvement in it
Mhm.
and things like, no. I really can't remember that because there was places that a black person actually could not work. But it looked like when the women started getting into the workforce,
Mhm.
because it would always look like more black women than it was black men.
Hmm.
And they would hire the woman before they would hire the man.
Hmm.
Because at that time, it was taught to us that if they hired the woman, they killed two birds with one stone.
In terms of it's a minority and a woman?
Right.
Is that okay?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Interesting.
So when that started happening, it was almost like a snowball effect.
Yeah.
The more it did it, the more it happened.
Okay.
You know, the bigger it gets, the faster it rolls downhill.
Yeah.
So it's that snowball effect.
Gotcha. We've also heard about Mr. Middlebrook in particular organizing, I don't know if you'd call it a protest, but basically trying to get some folks to be able to allow blacks into the Liberty Park pool.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Any memories of any of that? Or
Well, at one time, you might have been allowed to stand on the outside and watch them swim.
Mm.
It was just that bad. No, as far as you getting into the pool,
Yeah.
no. That wasn't even thought about. North Lake Park got so bad that they sold that park rather than it used to be out there by the skating rink.
Right, the pool you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pool.
Okay.
No, that was sold to a private enterprise.
Okay. And well, in my memory as a kid in the '80s, I remember there. I don't think many blacks ever were allowed. And again, I don't know that it was a written rule, but I don't remember any being there.
No. You probably remember right.
Yeah, and I think they did it. The way they would do it is through. It was a private membership. You know,
Right.
You had to. Right.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like Westbrook Country Club even now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a country club, so they can,
Yeah.
it's by memberships.
Pick and choose who
They
gets.
pick and choose.
Mhm.
Now, that's a funny thing, blacks would stay here in Mansfield, but they couldn't join Westbrook.
Mhm.
But now, they used to, at one time, they couldn't live in Shelby,
Mhm.
but you could join the country club.
Oh, really? And how odd. Interesting. That's a new one. I hadn't heard that yet. Wow. Well, my understanding was that a lot of blacks were involved in constructing Liberty Pool.
Yes.
They were, I believe that the park itself was a WPA program.
project,
Yeah.
yes.
But then,
Yes.
it's just,
Yes.
yeah, the insanity of, I
And
mean, it's kind of, echoed in American history too. You know, you built
And it
on
is.
yeah,
And it is.
So,
And really, it's different today, but it's not as free as people think it is.
mhm. Yeah, we've still got a long way to go, I
A
think.
long way to go.
You know, and this is my own personal sort of view on things. I almost feel like how to word this. It's like it was better to know, in terms of like segregation. At least you knew where you stood.
Right.
Whereas if you live under the illusion of freedom,
Mhm.
and all these discrimination and disparities exist,
Mhm.
and you're not even really aware of it, or it makes it tougher to address it in a certain sense.
And it is. A lot of people came up from the South.
Mhm.
Lots of people came up from the South. And they didn't expect to find what they found.
I'll bet.
You see. And they had to actually be taught again, yes, you across the line,
Yeah.
but it's not really that different.
Right.
You still better know where you can go and where you can't go.
Mhm. Now, did anyone in your family ever pass anything like that on to you, like their impression of coming here, or anything like that? Or?
Well, it was a known thing that if someone come up from the South that had never been north before,
Mm.
I mean, it was almost your duty to let them know, you know,
Yeah.
don't get yourself in trouble or this or that.
Right.
See,
Hmm.
see, because even then, well, where we're at now was called the Flats.
Mhm.
That's what I couldn't think of before.
Okay.
It was called the Flats.
Mhm.
But look how close the Flats is to uptown.
Yeah.
See.
Well, I've heard some wild stories about the Flats. Anything you can share about
Well,
any memories or anything, or?
well, they said that really that the Flats was a red light district.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
And they said, and what go on in the Flats, that's okay down there,
Mhm.
but you can't do that up here. In other words, we're clean up here, it's dirty down there.
Yeah.
And people lived with that for years and years and years
Mhm.
because they didn't know anything else.
Yeah.
And they always would say, this can't be done and that can't be done. But our leaders would say they can do whatever they want to do.
Mhm.
And they proved it right here.
Yeah. Well, what do you make of the way things have turned out in terms of, where we are now, where the industry's gone, and clearly the boom time's well past.
I think people are in for a great awakening,
Mhm.
because where you had the advantage before, the only advantage now, and we're gonna have to get this to our children, white or black.
Mhm.
The only advantage now is education.
Yes, sir. Couldn't agree more.
I don't care if you're white, blue, black, purple, or otherwise. Without an education, you won't make it.
It's true. Now, go ahead.
Because the color of money is green. And if you can make me money, I'm gonna hire you.
Yep,
If you can't make me any money, I don't need you.
it's true.
And unless these children can get this in their mind, we're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah. I think it's happening slowly, but
We worry about these foreign countries, but these foreign countries are educating their children.
mhm.
They don't put a demand on them, you must learn.
Mhm.
Not, do you want to go to school? Oh, no, you're going to school.
Right.
And this is what you're going to study.
Yeah. What about, I've heard things like you could leave your job in the morning
Oh.
and have another job that afternoon.
Easy,
Is that-
easy. Especially the hard jobs,
Yeah.
especially the hard jobs, like your foundries and things like
Mhm.
that. And you had so many places. You had Dominion Electric, you had Westinghouse, you had Tappan, major companies, not just major
Sure.
companies. You had the steel mill. You could walk from one to the other one, oh no, I don't want this one. And now you can walk all week in one time.
Right, yeah.
You see. Just like now, I raised my children. I had 4, we lost 1, raised 3.
Okay.
And out of the three, I had 2 grandchildren.
Mhm.
Actually, I had 3 grandchildren. But 2 of the grandchildren, we adopted.
Hmm.
And they never went to public school. And people would ask me, they said, why are you spending all that money to send them to private school when you can go to public school? I said, because of my age, my health, I'm giving them a jump start.
Mm.
So here they went to St. Pete's,
Okay.
and they both graduated from St. Pete. And they both went to college from there.
Mhm.
One graduated from Ohio Dominican.
Mm.
The other one graduated from Ohio State. The one that graduated from Ohio State, he was going to study medicine.
Hmm.
But industry bought him out.
Hmm.
They showed him where the money he could make now
Yeah.
and the money he won't owe by going to
Yeah.
medical school. And he chose to go to industry. And now he's working for Nike out of Portland, Oregon.
Oh, really? That's great.
Just got back from China,
Hmm.
going over there setting up and so forth and so on.
Wow.
And they said, well, why are you spending your money? I says, I'm not spending. I'm investing.
Yeah.
And that's what people are going to have to learn to do.
Yes,
If they're
sir.
going to want their children to make, they're going to have to invest in them.
Yeah. Right.
But the child going to have to be willing to learn too.
Sure, sure. That's
And
fantastic.
so please say, you're taking away their rights. No, I'm taking away their right to be stupid.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
So he was telling me how they educate their children over in China.
Yeah.
They demand them to go. They demand them to take this, to take that, to take this.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to do the same thing.
Yeah. I think you're right. Now, obviously, you're a married man.
Yes.
Did your wife work
Yes.
in the area?
My wife worked ever since after she was through having her children. She worked up until she retired from Westinghouse in '91, I think it was.
Okay. What did she do there?
She worked on the line,
Did she?
on the range line.
Did
yeah.
she? Wow.
We've been married for over 58 years.
Wow.
So,
That's fantastic.
so we both take pride in that even after we raised our own,
Mm-hmm.
and then my one daughter died of breast cancer, and we adopted her 2 children
Hmm.
and educated both of them.
Wow.
And so now we say we're done.
Yeah. I think you've put in your time
Yeah.
at this point.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm just about out of questions. I don't know if there's anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to add. I'm basically interested in anything about the history of Mansfield.
I'm just about dry.
Okay.
The longer you set, the more you can think of.
Sure.
But it's nothing I can really put together.
Okay.
I think.
All right. Well,
I was born and raised here. I've been here all my life. So,
okay. Seen a lot come and go, a lot of changes. And,
yes.
yeah,
I mean, I'm 79 now, so.
that's great. Okay. Well, I want to thank you again, for taking the time out to come and talk to us. We really do appreciate it. So.